All right, welcome, friends. This is the start of week 3 of Hurricane Hub Live. We're so glad you're here joining us on 13 News Now. Plus, we got a lot to talk about. And, this past weekend, we learned about, obviously, the catastrophic flooding in Texas and, of course, some other flooding going on in North Carolina. But these are the results of the remnant moisture from landfalling tropical systems, the first being Tropical Storm Barry that made landfall in Mexico over a week ago. Now, that tropical moisture banked up against the higher terrain in Mexico and then moved north, and that helped to set the stage for the catastrophic flooding event that's ongoing still in parts of central Texas. So we want to check in there first as the death toll continues to increase and rise in Texas after those devastating floods struck the state over the past weekend. At least 90 people now are confirmed dead and 11 more are still missing. Crews are out in force as the search and rescue missions continue, and we've got the latest from ABC's Jacqueline Lee.
New video shows the dramatic rescue of a man in Kerrville, Texas. This RV surrounded by floodwaters. The Coast Guard coming in by helicopter and lifting him to safety. ABC's Maria Villarreal embedded with the Coast Guard as they search through the dense forest.
We got a FLIR camera on the front of the aircraft. It is a very good camera that we have, and is also an infrared camera, so we can find heat signatures, things like that.
Crews out in force searching for survivors, with roads transformed into rivers after extreme flash flooding over the weekend. More than 400 first responders from 20 different agencies helping rescue nearly 1,000 people since Friday. Dozens still missing.
I need to tell my community and those families who are waiting, this will be a rough week. Primary search continues, and we remain hopeful.
This woman found clinging to a tree with floodwaters rushing below. Waters rising 26 feet in less than an hour over the weekend. Officials say many were asleep. The Guadalupe River overflowing, tearing through nearby Camp Mystic, where 750 girls were spending the holiday weekend. Some still reported missing, including 10-year-old camper Greta Toronzo from Houston. Among the dead, recent high school graduate and camp counselor Chloe Childress. Her family saying she lived a beautiful life of joy and faith, adding she was looking forward to dedicating her summer days to loving and mentoring young girls at Camp Mystic. Campers Sarah Marsh and Janie Hunt, just 8 and 9 years old, also killed.
For families to let go of their loved ones and not knowing they won't see them again, that's very devastation.
Just go hug your kids, because I got to tell you, I hugged my girls with tears in my eyes, because every one of us who's a parent, there but for the grace of God go I.
And search and rescue will be working around the clock, climbing through this dense forest of trees, trying to recover any survivors and any bodies. Jacqueline Lee, ABC News, Kerrville, Texas.
Next, we go to Rania Kaur at our sister station in San Antonio. She's on the scene with the latest on the recovery efforts and a warning for sightseers.
Hundreds of rescue agencies are in Kerr County, including the Texas Department of Public Safety, Texas Game Wardens, and even the Coast Guard. Any asset the rescuers can use to help find those that are missing, they're going to, whether it's by land, sea, or air. We've seen choppers, we've seen boats, and we've even seen K-9 units. That's saying one dedicated team is searching for the missing campers from Camp Mystic. 10 campers and 1 camp counselor are still unaccounted for. 700 girls attend Camp Mystic every single year. They're anywhere from the ages of 7 to 17 years old. They had to rapidly evacuate on Friday when the Guadalupe River was rising, many of them leaving their belongings behind. We know over the weekend, families and even the governor attended Camp Mystic to assess the damage and to collect any belongings that campers may have left behind. An urgent message from officials this morning is if you don't live in the area, please do not come to Kerr County. The Kerrville Police Department tells me they're having trouble getting through the city limits because of just how many sightseers are here. Many of the streets and roads are blocked for only emergency personnel and those locals. If you do not live here, please stay away. I'm Rania Kaur, sending it back to you.
And then just yesterday, another tropical storm, Chantal, made landfall in South Carolina, driving north into North Carolina. Take a look at this video from our affiliate station WTVD in North Carolina. This is video from Durham, where 80 people were rescued by boat. And several counties are under states of emergencies, and Governor Josh Stein says more than 100 roads remain closed because of flooding from the remnants of Tropical Storm Chantal. Just wild to see over in Texas and then, of course, along the eastern seaboard. And here we are very early on in the hurricane season, July the 7th, and you can see the uptick that's coming our way. Traditionally, that happens as we get into August and September. When you look back at the last 75 hurricane seasons in the Atlantic Basin, we see a dramatic uptick as early August, and then, of course, raging up until we get to the peak of the season, which is roughly around September the 10th. Still active in October before we start to see a marked decrease into the final month of the season, November. The season comes to an end November the 30th. So here's Chantal, what's left of it. Post-tropical storm Chantal, what does that mean? Post-tropical means it basically just lost its tropical characteristics. It now takes on more of a mid-latitude cyclone or storm system that we normally see in this part of the world. It takes on more of a frontal feature with it. It's not much to look at anymore, but it did bring obviously big impacts in central North Carolina and even up into the Richmond metro area over the last 12 hours. It's now situated over the Delmarva with winds of 25, and it's got some residual storms and showers with it. Now, the National Hurricane Center is no longer issuing advisories on this. They actually do something called a handoff, pretty much, to another agency under the National Weather Service branch, and that's the WPC, the Weather Prediction Center. And basically, the NHC, after a storm makes landfall, it's moved inland, and it hands off the additional advisories to the WPC to handle from there on out. And this is when the max sustained winds have decreased below tropical storm strength, which is 39 miles per hour or greater. So you saw post-tropical Chantal has dropped to 25 miles per hour. And really, they got the handoff earlier this morning from the National Hurricane Center. And that's when we dropped below that. Now, also, the system would not be expected to reemerge over water or regain tropical storm intensity in its forecast, which you saw with Chantal. It's going to reemerge out over the open waters, but it's not expected to organize again and become a tropical system or a tropical storm. And the WPC will continue issuing advisories as long as there's a threat for flooding. Now, we don't really see that anymore with Chantal, so we'll likely just see another advisory or two from the WPC before that just goes down into the record books and we move on from there. Here's the latest advisories at 5 o'clock. We might not even get an 8 o'clock advisory from WPC here. With gusts up to 35, you can see it moving just south of Long Island and then maybe over Suffolk County and far eastern Long Island there, but that looks to be about it over the next 24 hours. So sayonara to Chantal. We've got 3 named storms now in the bucket for the 2025 season. Will we have a 4th anytime soon? That's the big question, right? Well, so far this season, we've had a very lackluster, basin out in the main development region, and that's not unusual. This early in the season, it's most of the time driven by the presence of Saharan dust. It keeps the lid on any activity. Now, as time goes on, and we've talked about this numerous times so far in HHL, we get these plumes of dust coming off of Africa, but over time, we begin to see this dust plume drift farther to the north. And that will open up the main development region here for potential development. Now, we need seeds for something to come out of, right? So we'll have a fertile environment once the dust lifts north. We need a seed to plant in that fertile environment to develop some sort of system. And we get these from African easterly waves. And basically what these are tropical clusters of thunderstorms that organize and then they roll off the continent of Africa and hit the main development region. And these are the seeds for developing tropical storms. We've got a pretty robust one here just about to hit the coastline. Could this be something that potentially develops down the line? Sure, as we start to see the dust creep a little farther to the north, we're not going to have that dry mid-levels of the atmosphere kind of choking off any convection or thunderstorm activity that's trying to develop in some of these organizing waves. So we'll have to watch it closely, and these will become much more numerous and much more robust as we get deeper into the season. So we've knocked off 3 names, Andrea, Barry, and Chantal. Next up would be Dexter or Aaron. I just don't see that happening really in the next 7 days. The basin right now looks to be quiet. We'll have to just watch any of those waves. Now, in terms of climatology, we've got our 3rd named storm that happened already, right? That typically doesn't happen until August the 3rd or so. So that formed, was it on the 5th, became Chantal? So we were roughly a month ahead of schedule. And then typically you don't get the 4th named storm until the middle of August. That's not coming down the pike anytime soon, but we'll see where it ends up if we do get our 4th named storm well before that or not. Here's a look overall at the plots of our 3 named system. It started with Andrea in the subtropical Atlantic that was around for maybe 12 hours. And then Barry here, that moved over the Yucatan Peninsula, hit the southern Gulf and the Bay of Campeche, did develop briefly into a tropical storm. And as I talked about earlier on in HHL this evening, is that this remnant moisture here did stream north and it encountered a stalled boundary over central Texas. And that collision of that tropical moisture and a frontal boundary just created what we saw unfold there in central Texas over the last couple of days with that catastrophic flooding. And then most recently here, Chantal, that made landfall 36 hours ago, early Sunday morning ahead of dawn, as the strongest storm so far this season. I think it maxed out with winds at 50 miles per hour just ahead of landfall near Litchfield Beach in South Carolina, and then drifted north into North Carolina. That created its own flooding issues out in Durham, North Carolina, and just north of there. Now, so far this season, we've visited the Eastern Pacific quite often. And each time we visited, it has been very, very active. Now, I think this might be a bit of a change of pace that we're seeing unfold in front of us right now. Right now in the Eastern Pacific, there's hardly anything going on. We do have one wave, but you can see here, barely a shot of this one developing. So overall, the favorable environment that's been here pretty much for the last 6 weeks looks to be fading. And this could lead to probably an increase in activity in the Atlantic basin here. And we're going to talk about that in just a second. But look at the names that we've locked off here. 6 named storms, 2 major hurricanes in the Eastern Pacific. Eric was a Cat 4, Flossie was a Cat 3. And there was a wave out there last week that we thought had a pretty good shot of becoming Gil, and it looks like the favorable conditions there really backed off quick. And we never got Gil. Doesn't look like we'll get Henriette either from what's developing out there right now. So why is it a quieter Eastern Pacific could lead to a more active Atlantic? Well, since we've had so much activity in the East Pac, 6 named storms so far, with the activity here, the exhaust from those storms, the outflow aloft, gets carried off to the east, and that increases wind shear in not only the Gulf, but the Caribbean and even parts of the Atlantic as well. So if we don't have that exhaust or the increased wind shear as a result of high activity in the Eastern Pacific, that's just one limiting factor that's taken off the table. Second limiting factor, all the dust lifting to the north. So I think we're starting to see a more favorable situation set up for possibly entering a period of higher activity in the Atlantic basin as we go through the next couple of weeks. Now, we do have some sea surface temperature scars that have developed from all the activity in the Eastern Pacific basin. So what you're looking at here is sea surface temperature anomalies, the difference from normal, whether it be cooler or warmer than normal. Cooler than normal is going to be the blue shades. Warmer than normal is the yellows and even some oranges here. So we have some scarring going on here, and what that is, the scarring is pretty much the upwelling from storms that have been there. They've upwelled cooler waters from a depth, and they've replaced the warm surface waters with cooler than normal water. So you can kind of see the scarring there from Eric and Flossie that were both major hurricanes in that general area as they were developing. And then as they lifted northwest, they fell apart because it's much cooler ocean waters here as you get a little bit farther to the north there. But we have some scarring there. However, in the Atlantic basin, where we haven't had any activity yet in the main development region, we've had no activity in the Caribbean, and really the Gulf aside from Barry that was in the Bay of Campeche. So you've got a lot of untapped energy here still. And, you know, the high sun angle this time of the year, it is just growing, the amount of energy. And this warm water is not just at the skin of the ocean. It extends down to a depth, which means there's almost endless amounts of heat energy here for these storms to use as they develop here over the next couple of weeks. So that's the latest so far, guys. We're going to talk a little bit now about trivia, right? Everybody loves some trivia. Why not, right? I've got a trivia question here for you for Hurricane Hub Live, and we're going to go through the answer tomorrow, but I want to ask you this question. In which quadrant of a hurricane can you find the strongest of the winds? Which do you think that is? Is it going to be the right front, right rear, or left rear? Now, tomorrow we're going to go through the answer on this, and we're going to get a deep dive in exactly what the quadrants of hurricanes are, where you can find those strongest winds, and which is the area you don't want to be in if a storm system is approaching. You don't want to be in any of the quadrants, but one that can bring about the most storm surge and, of course, the strongest winds, meaning the most damage. So, folks, that's all we got for you today here on Hurricane Hub Live. I hope you enjoyed it. We're going to be back here tomorrow, same time, same place with updates on what's going on in Texas, what's going on in North Carolina, and to see what's going on in the basin overall in general, because for now, at least, it looks to be quite quiet. So I hope you enjoy the rest of your Monday evening, and we'll see you back here tomorrow at 8 p.m.